What's up, guys? It's Dave here, back at the Scattered Chaos podcast room. Today, I'm writing solo. And I think this podcast is going to be probably the toughest one I'll do yet, and maybe for a while. It took me a little bit of time to decide whether or not I was going to record a podcast of this caliber about this topic of what's happening in the Middle East. There's many reasons why I wanted to avoid it. And initially it was because everybody has their own personal opinions, and I'm never one to push my opinion on anybody. Along with that is that the amount of hate that's coming from both sides has been pretty grueling, disheartening, sad, anger. But I think it's important to talk about that event and what it means to not just me as a human, not just me as a Jew, but the world, and where we have come, where we are going, and what's led us to maybe this point. And a lot of people have asked me about why this is happening. They want context, and I do not sit here and pretend like I understand Judaism, being Muslim or Christian. I don't understand the Torah, the Quran, or the Bible. This is just coming from somebody who I want to believe that I'm very open. My parents raised us that way. So kind of let's dive into it. It's going to be boring. It's just going to be me, but hopefully you'll enjoy it, because I think I'm going to try to give some context. I'm going to give some history. I have my hefty notes over here that I thought would be better not to try to memorize, but more to have and be able to kind of talk about the history of the land and why we're here where we are today. So thanks for joining again. Jeff is on assignment with his wife doing something. I don't know what, but hey, thanks, Jeff, for not being here. But let's dive into it. So obviously everybody knows what happened in Israel last weekend. And unfortunately, 1,300 civilians, men, women, children, older folks, military personnel were ambushed by Hamas. And if I could preface that anytime I say they, I'm referring to Hamas. I want everybody to understand something, that I understand 1,000% the difference between Hamas and the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people deserve to live in freedom. And I think the conversation needs to be included in a lot of questions of why. So obviously, Israel was surprised by this attack. I don't know anything about the military there. I know that Israel's considered one of the strongest militaries in the world. But even then, people make mistakes, and obviously this was a mistake of a severe caliber. So Israel was struck at multiple locations, a couple kibbutzes. And if somebody doesn't know what a kibbutz is, it is kind of a area which the people live off the land and work together to develop a life with either their religion, their culture, but everybody kind of works together. And by no means is it always a religious thing. The kibbutz down south near Gaza, one of the kibbutzes themselves was very active in peace coordinations between the kibbutz and the Gazan people. Specifically, the one older lady that was kidnapped. She was actually part of an NGO which tried to normalize relationships between the border towns. And she spent a lot of time doing that because, as an Israeli, she wanted peace. She wanted to be able to live next to her Arab neighbors and not worry if they were going to do something to her or if she was going to do something to them. And as time went on, it obviously was, there's tension, obviously. We saw that. But the tension came from Hamas. to Israel under the disguise of the oppression or apartheid or whatever somebody wants to call it. Um, and I want to also say that some of the things I will say are definitely going to probably sound one-sided because I'm Israeli. I'm American. I was born here. I love this country. It's given me all the freedoms in the world. Hence, I can do this and not be scrutinized by anybody but my peers. But I'm also Israeli because that's where my parents were born. That's where my sister was born. That's where my brother was born. And all my family was there. And I can tell you that from the time I was born in 1980 all the way till probably 93 or 4, I spent 3 months a year in Israel. And I can tell you, I remember days playing with Arab kids, Israeli kids, Jewish kids, Muslim kids. It was never, as a kid, I never saw that. I never saw what was happening in all these other areas of Israel because for so long, Israelis and Arabs lived together and worked together to provide just a great life for their family, and that's it. And those Arabs, whether they be Muslims or Christians, all they cared about was having a good life, having a home over their head. I mean, a roof over their head, food on their table, loving relationships with their neighbors, whether they were Israelis or Arabs. It didn't matter. It was just, from my eyes as a kid, it seemed peaceful. Now, obviously, there was a lot going on that I didn't see, and my parents were very good about keeping that away from us just because they didn't want us to look at the negative and then potentially have a stereotype towards these great people that my dad and my mom and all our family were friends with. So that's kind of part of like my history of Israel. It's actually kind of funny in a way because my dad was born in 1947 when Israel was actually called Palestine. So my dad is actually, his birth certificate says the land of Palestine, where my mom was born in 48, and her birth certificate says the country of Israel. And so over the last couple of days, I've been thinking about that. And because a lot of people are talking about, the Israelis or the Jews, they don't say Israelis, they say the Jews. And for those that don't understand the difference, there's two different things. There's Jews, which is a religion, and then there's Israelis, which is a nationality. And to me, I think it's a very important conversation to have because in every religion, there is extremists. We have them in our religion, the religious datim, we call them datim. They're the really Hasidic Jews that have extreme fundamental thinking about the land of Israel and that there should be no Arabs there at all because that's what we had before and we were conquered and so forth and so forth. And then you have just your regular Israelis who just want to live in peace. And I would guess that 75% are wanting peace, and there might be 25%. Because remember, Israel is a religious state. Like many of the states or the countries around us, around Israel, they're based on fundamental religions. You have obviously Jordan, beautiful fucking country, but it is seeped with religion. Egypt, the same thing. Lebanon, even though Hezbollah is there and has caused what used to be the gem of the Middle East, has now become a war zone. And for those that don't know, Beirut was considered back in the days like the Paris of the Middle East. Everybody went to Beirut to have an amazing time, drink coffee on the streets, eat all the food you want, and nobody cared who you are and where you're from. Israelis were going in, Christians alike, Americans, nobody cared where you were from because it was not ran like it is ran now. And unfortunately, Lebanon is a beautiful country, but majority is ran by Hezbollah, which is an Iranian-backed terrorist group. So I kind of want to stop there and just talk about the history. And I'm going to refer to my notes just because I don't want to give wrong information. And this is straight from the encyclopedia. I didn't Google this and say I actually went to Webster's dictionary and asked for a full understanding of the history of Israel. And so I want to start with ancient history. Obviously, we know Israel was formed in 1948, but let's go back, way back, okay? 3,000 years, whatever. Let's just talk about it. So ancient Palestine was home to various indigenous people, including the Canaanites, Jebusites, the Amorites, and the Philistines. It was a crossroad of ancient trade. It was basically the hub of the Middle East because it was on the water. It was on the Mediterranean Sea. So it was such a great place for places from Europe to come, Africa, and then it would be able to spread east. So if you look at thinking of Israel or Palestine or whatever you want to call it, it sits on the Mediterranean Sea on the left side, which would be the west side, and then it has Syria, Jordan, Egypt on the east side. The north is Lebanon and the south is Egypt. We all know that the area has been engulfed with religion, specifically religious texts, including the Bible, where it is known as the Promised Land. It played a central role in the history of the Israelites in the establishment of the Kingdom of Israel and the Kingdom of Judah. So from 63 BCE to 636 CE, it was under the rule of the Roman Empire. It conquered Judea, ancient Israel, leading to a period of Roman rule. In 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Jewish Second Temple in Jerusalem during the First Jewish-Roman War. Later in 135 CE, the Romans crushed the Bar Kokhba revolt, leading to the renaming of Judea as Palestina after the Philistines as a way to erase Jewish identity. So when somebody says Palestine, what they're referring to is Palestina, which is a word Philistine, which was used to basically erase the Jewish identity in the land. So here comes the 7th century, and in 636 CE, the Islamic, and I'm going to probably botch this name, so I apologize with no disrespect, Islamic Rashidun Caliphate conquered Palestine. Jerusalem became an important city in Islam due to his association with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Between 1099 and 1291, the Crusaders basically controlled the area for 2 centuries, with Jerusalem being captured during the First Crusade in 1099. And then most people are hearing a lot about the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire took control of Palestine in 1517, ruling it for over 4 centuries. The population was diverse, including Arabs, Jews, Christians, and others. And then here comes the 19th and 20th century. So by the late 19th century, Zionism, a Jewish nationalist movement, gained momentum, leading to increased Jewish immigration to Palestine. After World War I, the League of Nations granted Britain the mandate to govern Palestine. So it became a Britain colony, basically, which further fueled tension between Jewish immigrants and Arab residents. That pissed off a lot of people because prior to World War I, they were all living together. There was definitely a lot of fighting, but they were living together with all the religions and really nobody in control. There was never a Palestinian president. There wasn't a Jewish president. There wasn't a Christian president up until 1948, okay? So if we continue, what happens after that, after World War II, and I want to talk about World War II because it's very important to my history as a human being and as a Jewish or child of Judaism. So for most of you guys know, my grandma and grandpa lost a lot of their family in the Holocaust. And when I hear somebody chant, Nazi remarks or hold up the swastika, it brings back some really tough memories because as kids, we never really talked about it. My grandpa, Jacob Uziel, who's my brother's namesake, was a survivor. I think there was a total of 9 in their family, and only 4 of them survived. The parents were perished. He was a potato peeler for the SS Army. Basically, he worked in the kitchen, peeling potatoes. My grandmother, which I don't know for how many brothers and sisters she had, but I believe that it was her and her brother, one of her brothers that survived. And she was in Auschwitz also with my grandpa. She was working in the farms, but um, those that know my grandma knew how small she was already at her age when I was born. But she was really petite and got even more skinny and unhealthy because she couldn't eat and the scariness. And so how my grandpa and grandma met was my grandpa would peel the potato skins and pass them to my grandma through the fence. And that's how my grandma survived. And a little bit of history about my grandpa. My grandpa was born in Greece um, and with descendants of Spain. And so when the Nazis occupied a part of Greece, they came to the area of Thessaloniki, which was just mainly it was a very big Jewish population. Um, Again, back then, they were not Israelis. They were Jewish in Greece. So they were actually Greek citizens. And so they got sent to Auschwitz. My grandma came from, if I'm not mistaken, Transylvania, is now Romania. And she was brought to Auschwitz also. And again, they met. Grandpa was feeding them potato skins. That's how my grandma and grandpa survived. And when they got liberated, when the U.S. and Britain liberated Auschwitz, they were sent on a boat to Cyprus. And then from Cyprus, they went to what was called Palestine. And in 40, I want to believe, I'm trying to remember where my uncle was. I think my uncle was born in Cyprus. Yes, he was. And then the three of them went to, they got taken from Cyprus to Palestine because under British mandate, nobody knew what to do with all these displaced Jews. And there was only one country that protected the Jews completely during the Holocaust. That only one Jewish person was actually taken to concentration camp, and that's Albania. And if you know anything about Albania, it's mainly Muslims. But Jews and Muslims back in those days in Albania got along with each other. They loved each other. They were neighbors. Our cultures are very much alike. I mean, I always laugh, and I tell Tariq, who's behind the camera right now, that like I can understand some of the anger that they have towards Israelis because we steal their food. Man, they have the best food. Like anything you could think of, we've mimicked it because it's such a good culture togetherness that I could understand why, they always say that we're the cousins of each other. And I truly believe it. And so going back to the history, so when all the Jews were displaced, they were brought to Palestine, or many were. And so obviously during the time of World War II, a lot of the Jews were taken to the Holocaust. They were put into the concentration camps. So they were definitely not in Palestine at the time. There were a bunch still, because the Nazis never came into Palestine to conquer it because it was controlled by the British. If I would assume that if they weren't controlled by the British, the Nazis probably would have invaded and done whatever they needed to do to get more Jews out of there. So here comes now 1948. And during the time after the Holocaust to 47 and a half, there was a lot of conflict between Jews and Arabs. And that was because the Arabs felt like all these Jews came into our land. We've been living here. And why do they get to have this land back? Why is this their land now, quote unquote? And, it's obviously deeper than that. But it came to a point where there was so much fighting that the British said, enough is enough. We want out. We're going to give this piece to Israel, which would be the northern piece of what is now Israel. and then the southern piece would be for the people who were living on the land of Palestine at the time. Prior to 48, there was never a president of Palestine. It was not ruled by anybody but the queen herself. Okay? So when somebody says, well, Palestine was a country, no, it was not a country. It was a colony of Britain. And that doesn't mean that they didn't have the right to exist. I'm just saying what facts seem to be facts. So 48 came. Ben Gurion was voted to be the Democratic president of Israel, and the area which was Palestine. I don't know who was president, if there was even a president at the time. There was the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was formed to protect the Palestinian people against the Israelis. And again, I want to take away that being Palestinian doesn't mean you're Muslim. Palestinians, there's Christians that live in Palestine right now that are Christian and Muslims. Same in Israel. It's not all Jews that live there. There are Christians, there's Muslims, there's people from all over the world. I mean, there's a big, there's a lot of people from the Philippines that live there. It's just a very diverse pot of people from Asia, Middle East. And so 48 comes, and that's kind of where everything starts. And from 48 to 67, there was, and actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to my notes because I want to make sure I don't mess up. Okay, so here we go. In 1947, the United Nations proposed a plan to partition Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Again, there was no such thing as Israel, so there was no such thing as Israeli. So they call it a Jewish and Arab state, with Jerusalem as its international city. Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but Arab leaders rejected it, leading to the 1947 to 1949 Arab-Israeli War. In 1948, on May 14th, 1948, Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel, leading to the immediate recognition by the United States and the Soviet Union. Arab countries invaded, resulting in the Arab-Israeli War from 1948 to 49, also known as the War of Independence. The Armistice Agreements, that's 1948. The Armistice Agreements were reached between Israel and neighboring Arab states, formalizing the borders, with the West Bank and Gaza Strip coming under the Jordanian and Egyptian control, respectively. Now, what I'm about to say is something that I'm learning day and day, and Tariq will probably give me a head nod or no. I've been learning a lot about the Palestinian people's origin. And if what I just read was correct, a lot of the people that lived in Palestine were of Jordanian, Egyptian ancestry. Because my understanding is there's a lot of last names of people that are in Palestine that come from a Jordanian or Egyptian namesake. Now, I don't know if that's true. It would make sense just because if it was under the control of Egypt and Jordan, those are the people that would be living there or had been living there. Because remember, the Sinai was not existent before 48. So we don't really know who everybody was from. It's not like they documented it. So, okay, then from 49 to 67, there were definitely clashes. And a lot of tension between the Arab states, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and I may take back Jordan because I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. But there was just clashes, always. Just because there was this unwritten hatred to the Jewish people, let me phrase that, to Israeli people, because everybody felt like, well, why did Britain give them the land? Why didn't it, become Palestine and then the Palestinians could decide what happens? Well, that's not what happened. And unfortunately, it escalated to 1967, and that was when we had the Six-Day War. And so in June 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, leading to the Six-Day War. Israel captured the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai Peninsula. So I'm just going to kind of talk about each area. So the West Bank is on the east of Israel that borders Jordan. And then you have Gaza Strip, which is basically to the south. It's attached to Egypt through the Suez Canal, and it's basically that's kind of the same thing as the Sinai Peninsula. You have East Jerusalem, which was if where it was very religious for the Muslims because of the mosque there, and then you had and then going back, you have Golan Heights, which is the north towards Syria and a little bit of Lebanon. The occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip began, leading to significant Palestinian resistance. I'm not going to sit here and say why we occupied those areas. I don't know. I don't know the military. I don't want to. My assumption is the anger that the Palestinians had towards the Israelis for occupying those areas was because those were areas now under Israeli control after the Six-Day War. It was a preemptive attack, so they were not, it was, again, preemptive, meaning they did it before anything else was going to happen. There was talks that they were concerned that they were going to get attacked, and this is why they did what they did. And then in the so then you have the Oslo Accords. And the 1993 Oslo Accords between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization aimed to establish a framework for peace negotiations. The accords led to the creation of the Palestinian Authority and partial Israeli withdrawal from parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The conflicts continued, right? And so peace negotiations have been marked by periods in progress and setbacks, including the Second Intifada between 2000 and 2005. Conflicts in Gaza notably in 2008 to 2009, 2012, and 2014. And to be really honest, it's kind of always been going on. And so one of the things that is really important that we talk about is in 2005, after the Second Intifada, Israel basically pulled out of what was Gaza Strip, and a democratic vote happened with the Palestinian people, with Hamas being put in as the leading government body. The West Bank, we occupied, we still have some occupation there, but that area is run by the Palestinian Authority. And from my research, we haven't had a lot of or much problems with the West Bank because there are a lot of people that come out of the West Bank to work in Israel. And same with Gaza. Last year, Israel put out 14,000 passes to allow Arabs out of Palestine to come work in Israel. And the reports are showing, and these are, first count saying that, people that came to work in Israel were making 10 times the amount that working a whole month in Palestine. And so then Hamas basically took over, and the conflicts remained unresolved with issues such as borders, the status of Jerusalem, Palestinian refugees, and security concerns being major obstacles to peace. So we come to this day in October of 2023, and this gruesome act is done by Hamas. And I've talked to a lot of friends, and a lot of friends say, well, are there Palestinians in there too fighting with them? I mean, I would assume, but I don't want to make assumptions because that makes an ass out of you and me. And so I would have preferred to say that Hamas led this terrorist attack on Israelis and non-Israelis. As we're coming to find out, 29 Americans are dead. We don't know how many are kidnapped even. But they did it on civilians. And I've always been the kind of person is like, war is war. If you want to fight for war, go fight it with the military. And if you are the military wing of the Hamas, you should be attacking the military wing of Israel, not vice versa. Like, you shouldn't be going to civilians. And I don't really want to talk about too much about, but you did this and I did this and you did this, because that's not going to get us anywhere. And I truly want to believe that the Palestinian people, whether they be Muslim or Christian, want peace. And I would want to bet that 99% of them want peace. How do we get there? I don't know. I only own a limo company. I can give my opinion. I saw what it was like when there was Arabs in Israel. It was peaceful, but those Arabs were peaceful people. And that's where it gets really hard. You know, you're seeing reports about Israel bombing into Gaza with indiscriminatory, just attacking places and not worrying about civilians. And, you know, I could want to believe that Israel doesn't want to kill any civilians. That's what I believe in my heart. I can't speak for Israel. I don't live in Israel. I live here. But what I do believe is that the people that are in the military right now are younger than us. They're 18 to 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds that are taking orders from someone above them. They don't have enough pay grade to get, the reason why. But if you're looking on social media, which Tariq and I were just talking about, it's like everywhere now. You see a lot of Israeli soldiers on TikTok now showing that they don't want to be in this war. And I would bet that there's no Palestinian that wants to be in this conflict. But the question I have, and I hope to have on another episode, one of my Palestinian friends who I'm very close with, to kind of get his side of things and how he believes. Because I don't want it to be just my side. And obviously, this is my podcast. I can say what I want. But I'm also very open. But at some point, the Palestinian people have to ask themselves, why over the last 17 years have we not progressed as a country? And if you look at other countries like Jordan, Egypt, even Lebanon, I would say Jordan and Egypt are the best representation of what to do after war. They're a prospering country. They're safe to go to. They have tourists all the time there. They've built an infrastructure that's, to the best what's in the Middle East. And then you go to places like United Emirates and all these other places. And again, those countries are driven by oil. We understand that. Saudi Arabia still lacks in humanitarian. We understand that. And the fact that Israel and Saudi Arabia were even at talks to have a peace accord is a very big deal. Because one, for Israel, it would legitimize itself as a state. And Saudi Arabia would then be able to work with Israel on a bunch of stuff, because I bet that we can get a lot of resources from Saudi Arabia and they could get from Israel. And a lot of people are saying that the reason Hamas did this was because of these talks, but I don't really believe so, because what they did on October 7th had to be planned for a while. I mean, they attacked from sea, air, and ground to a country that is, probably the second best army or smartest army in the world. And we were taken back. It is hard to watch the catastrophe of war. Watching buildings get blown up, watching accounts of Palestinian people not knowing what to do, where to go. I give credit to Israel for, giving warning and giving an evacuation order. I don't know how much that would have helped or how it could have helped, being that there's really nowhere for them to go. I heard Tariq, the current king, is Abdullah, right? King Abdullah in Jordan was on the news recently saying, there's the line, we're not going to have any Palestinian refugees. Egypt supposedly said they were going to open up just for humanitarian. But it is really sad. It's sad, but it's understandable why a lot of the Arab nations are not willing to help the Palestinian people. And and it's not the Palestinian I think they have a problem with. I think they have a problem of how do you identify Palestinians and Hamas? Because it's not like Hamas fighters are stupid. If they want to get out of that area, all they have to do is take off their uniform, and they're Arabs. It's not that they all look alike. That's not what I mean. But it's just like they blend in. They're another, they're Arabs. It's like if you put an Israeli in an Arab city, you probably wouldn't be able to tell there's a difference because we actually, those that live in Israel all come from some type of, whether it be Turkey, it could be, there's what we call Sephardic Jews, which are going to be your more Arabic countries. And so the Israelis and the Arabs, they look alike. And so for Jordan and Egypt, they're probably concerned of, we don't want the bad. We can't afford to have the bad because Jordan has lived in peace for, 20 plus years. Egypt has not had any issues over the last 20 years. And yes, there's been little scuffles between Egypt and Israel. That's part of, being, but since they had the peace accord, everything's been nice and quiet. And so one has to ask the question, why won't any of the Arab nations assist in this situation? Iran sits on their throne and throws money at Hamas and Hezbollah, but are not willing to actually help the Palestinian people. Obviously, I understand then the other side of it is, well, if we take them out of Palestine or West Bank or Gaza, that just gives more land to Israel. I totally understand that. So I understand both sides and I respect both sides. But I think it's also, there needs to be the question is, are the Palestinian people want peace? And if they want peace, are they willing to give up the Hamas side of it and maybe put the Palestinian authorities back in? I don't know. I don't know if that's the right question. From what the articles are saying, Gaza and West Bank has gotten a lot of money from many countries, not for humanitarian. UN gives a lot. And obviously it's not being used for infrastructure because unfortunately, and I can't speak for the West Bank, but Gaza still looks the same as it did 20 years ago or 25 years ago, because even with the humanitarian aid that even the country that fights them all the time gives them electricity, water, and gas. And that is, Israel's giving it to the Palestinian people for the sake of a humanitarian side of the conflict. Israel acknowledges the fact they don't always do things right. And I think this is their way of like maybe saying, hey, we're sorry, here's stuff that helps you rebuild. Let's use it for proper use. And it's not being used for proper use. And unfortunately, the Palestinian people are the ones to suffer. And now the Israelis are suffering. And I do believe that the Palestinian people for a long time have been suffering because they've never been able to call somewhere their home. And that's not fair. They deserve to have a state like I believe Israel deserves to have a state. How they get there, I think that will have to be with some really strong talking points about peace. I watched a video today regarding United Emirates and Israel. They've had a peace agreement for the last 2 years. And they had about 6 or 7 citizens of the UEA saying that it was the greatest thing that ever happened for peace because now they can work together on making things better for everybody. We learn from them, they learn from us. We make money off them, they make money off of us. Everybody's prospering. And all they care about is peace. And so, the situation is by no means over. I mean, I think we're going into almost 2 weeks at this point. Tomorrow morning will be 2 weeks. And, I don't see it coming to an end until, Gaza is clear of any remnants of Hamas. Unfortunately, there is collateral damage when it comes to war. The bombs that come from Gaza that go into Ashkelon and hit a hospital, it's sad, but it's part of war. And, I would rather have peace, but if, there can't be peace on the backs of the potential of another attack. It just can't do that anymore. It's time for everybody involved to step up. I think the Palestinian Authority has to step up and say, we don't want this for our people anymore. We want peace. We want to live in harmony. Because if we continue this cycle of violence, the next generation is fucked. And I honestly, when I was growing up, I never thought I would be even having a conversation about this, because I truly believe that there was going to be peace. And, you know, I don't have the answer, but I can tell you that the feelings I have inside are of anger, disappointment, frustration. The first week was really rough. I found myself to be in some really dark places, because, as an American Israeli, obviously my alliance is with America first. But I've always believed that America could protect itself, because we are so far from anybody. It's not like Canada or Mexico are going to attack us. And I don't say that jokingly, but it is kind of but being an Israeli, also the fear of one of the Arab nations having a bad day and not wanting Israel to exist is a daily, situation in Israel. And thank God that we have partners like Egypt and Jordan and UA and Abu Dhabi and these countries that truly are wanting peace. And I hope that the Saudis will continue in this peace talks, because I think the more we get into peace talks, I think it will be better leverage to really push for peace with the Palestinian people and not with Hamas. Iran is their own little problem. I've been watching a lot of videos from Iran where they're really supporting Israel. Obviously the ones in charge are they would like all Israel to be Israelis to be killed and thrown into the sea. And the chanting lately that's been happening on the streets of United States and UK. I have no problem with free Palestine. I have a problem when they say from the desert to the sea. I don't think they understand what that means in the reference to, really just pushing the the Israelis into the sea forever. And that meaning basically washing away of them. I think that true Palestinians know what they want. They want freedom. And they don't want death. And they don't want wiping away another culture for their peace. And unfortunately, the masses are of the young generation here in America that really have no experience of even being in Israel or being in Palestine. Obviously, there's a lot of different groups that are supporting Palestine that probably need to rethink about their support of Hamas. Maybe condoning Hamas and, praising the Palestinian people might be a good thing, because, again, Hamas does not represent Palestinians. And that has to be clearly stated when you have these marches. And I don't think that the youth of our generation understand that. Everybody is a liberal fighter, but won't go there to fight. One of the greatest things that I've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks is how fast and the Israeli people that were soldiers would go back to Israel to protect its land. It's disheartening because they're giving up their life in a democratic state with the freedoms to speak and freedoms to do things, to then go to a democratic state that has to defend itself to be free. And again, I want nothing but peace for the Palestinian people. I want them to be able to live a life just as great as I know my family has in Israel. I have a lot of family there, a lot that I don't talk to. I am, thank God, none of my close family has been hurt by this tragedy. I know that extended family has been hurt. and friends have been hurt, and on both sides. And one of our buddies here who helps us out here at the shop last week came to work, or came to work on my boat, and I was gone. I was traveling, and we came to find out that his sister and his two nieces were killed in a rocket attack from Israel. And that hurts, man. Like, he's a friend of mine. He's my brother. Like, I don't look at him any different than I would look at Rodrigo or Tariq or Jeff. Like, I don't care what nationality you are. I don't care what religion you are. You treat me right, guess what? I'm going to treat you right. And I'm going to hurt with you when something that could have been avoided. And I'm sorry for his loss. And may their memory be a blessing, because they didn't deserve this. And they were young, man. His sister is young. And for him to then respond to me and say they're in a better place, that hurts. Because home should be the better place, not in a grave. And, getting that perspective from somebody else was really like eye-opening, I guess is the best way to put it. I don't know. I will say this, because I think I've kind of hit all my points, is that as an American Israeli Jewish man, all I want is peace for us. I want peace for us. I want peace for the Palestinian people. I want peace for the Muslim people. I have a lot of Muslim friends. I have a lot of Muslim employees, past and present, that treat me sometimes better than my own family. And they don't look at me as Dave the Jew. They don't look at me as Dave the Israeli. They look at me as David. And I look at them as either Tariq or Saeed or Naeem or Ali or any of them. To me, they're just people. And if we could start there, I think we're going to move into the right direction. I do believe that if we start talking to people by their name and not their religion or their culture or their nationality, I think we actually would benefit from this, because it's time for change. I pray to God, and I'm not a religious man by any stretch of the imagination. I go against everything my religion talks about, specifically tattoos. Like, as a human being, this needs to stop, and we need to figure out a way to stop from both sides. It can't be just Israel stopping and praying that, the Hamas doesn't attack again. It needs to be, how do we stop on both sides so it doesn't continue and the cycle stops? Because it is time for that fucking area to get back to the beautiful place it was. And I do believe it's going to happen. I hope it's going to happen in my lifetime. I'm praying to God. I want to be able to go to Israel soon and be able to go to Gaza and go to West Bank. And, I'm blessed that now I could go to Lebanon. I could go to Egypt, Jordan and Egypt. I would love to be able to see all the surrounding countries. I have no issues with any of them. I just want peace before I do that. So, yeah, I think I tapped out on this one. Again, I pray, I ask you to pray to whatever God you believe in, or that maybe not of God, or whatever you believe in, to bring peace to both Palestine and Israel, and bring peace to Palestine and Israel without any more bloodshed. And hopefully, the next time a podcast comes out, I'm going to have better news. We'll be updating the situation as we go. I don't want this podcast to be all about this situation, because the more limelight we put on it, the more it continues. And I think this was my way of kind of letting it out and kind of moving on from, not moving on, but allowing it to be what it is at this point, because I have zero control. So thanks again for watching, you guys. I love you guys. Thank you. We'll be seeing you next week here at Scattered Chaos Podcast. Love you guys. Bye.